I've been working with Hades for a long time, and he was sort of the main deity that I was working with at that time. So, that was the priority, is maintaining that relationship with him and continuing to grow that relationship. So I did set that intention. I also set the intention for the entire trip, that this trip would help me actualize my eventual career. I knew we weren't going to work in national parks forever. It was just sort of like a fun thing that we could do. And we were like, we might as well just do it. Like, it's a fun opportunity. And we're doing nothing anyway for the rest of the summer. And we both lost our jobs. So we might as well just go cross country and do this thing that we were kind of thinking about doing anyway. Hey, Witch. Welcome back to the Diaries of a Witch podcast. My name is Angelica Crashi, and today I'm going to tell you all about my experiences traveling as a witch, traveling as a pagan, how I do it, how I travel and practice magic, and work with my deities as a pagan witch, and also, of course, giving takeaways for my tips on how to travel, yeah, as a witch, as a pagan, all of the above, right? This is a question that I get a lot. I feel like every story Q&A I do over on Instagram, I always get this question, like almost every time I do like a AMA on my stories. There's somebody asking about, hey, I'm going on an upcoming trip. I'm nervous about my daily practice, or how do you manage this? And I really wanted to chat about it because I have been doing a lot of traveling in the last couple of years. I really love traveling. It's one of my favorite things. I'm a Sagittarius moon in Venus. So I find things like traveling, which is just, a slice of the Sagittarius archetype, right? I find that it is something that just feels very natural to me. And also, that being said, I probably have a bias around traveling and magic because I have quite a positive attitude around it. I think that when I travel, I feel so connected to my magical practice, and I would say maybe more specifically my deity work practice. I just feel so connected to the world, to the deities, to the earth, um, all of the above, right? Like, as above, so below. I just feel like part of the whole, right? When I travel, which I think might, again, like, it might be a Sag moon thing. So take that with a grain of salt. But let's just hop right into my stories around traveling and how I've navigated that as a witch, and just that whole experience. And then we're gonna end with takeaways and my tips for how to travel and still practice magic, and all of the above, right? And deity work too. We're gonna focus on those two things. So in 2020, I had a big travel year, which it sounds really strange, right? Because it was the pandemic and there was, all sorts of things going on, of course, right? But I had graduated college in 2020, so I had just graduated college for my undergrad. I have a degree in English, specifically creative writing and philosophy. So, yay, so exciting. I feel like I'm using it even though it's one of those degrees where everybody's like, yeah, okay, yeah, the creative writing philosophy major, wow, so lucrative. But I feel like I'm like actually am using it, right? With like everything here. It's like so perfect for what I do now. But anyway, so I graduated in 2020. It was a super weird last semester because, like, obviously in March is when everything happened. I don't even have to tell you, I know you know, but just getting the timeline right. So like the last like 2 months of my undergrad were just so strange. And I was like, what is happening? What are we gonna do? But before then, like maybe in about the fall of 2019, me and my then boyfriend, now he's my husband, we were kind of talking about doing a big cross country road trip and working somewhere in the West. And we'd heard about like working for national parks or working for like concessionaires that service the national parks. So like working for like a hotel group that works with the different national parks in the West, that sort of thing, right? We'd heard about it. We had heard that you can get housing through them and like live in these remote areas and work in these remote areas. And we just thought it would be a really cool way to see the national parks because I freaking love national parks. I love hiking. I love all of the above. It's like I'm a Cap, right? I'm a Capricorn, Sun, rising, Mercury. Like there's a lot of planets I have in Capricorn and placements in Capricorn. And then the rest is like of the major placements are in Sagittarius. So this is like the ultimate Capricorn Sagittarius thing. It's like hiking in mountains, which I feel like is very Capricorn. And then like Sag, just like traveling and going everywhere and exploring. So that's why I love national parks so much and exploring and all of that kind of thing. So that's what we really wanted to do. And we'd already planned on doing that this summer after I graduated from college. So we kind of decided once everything happened that this might actually be kind of an underrated opportunity to do that trip and to like actually make that happen. And I was also like, living with my parents at the time and that was really weird. There's like a lot of issues with my parents and in my household. Now that I don't live with them, it sort of has resolved on my end because I'm not like involved. But that was also a major thing where like I don't want to like live here. Like I need to go somewhere else. Like I need to like leave, right? And at the time, it's like I lost my job due to everything that happened. I, like in Massachusetts, I still live in Massachusetts actually. It's like kind of an expensive area. So like at the time I'm like just got out of college, no prospects, right? Like I was like, what am I gonna do with my creative writing philosophy degree? What the fuck? Um, I lost my retail job, which is like, okay, great. Which it was great. Honestly glad I lost it. Like, see you later, bye. Bye retail. I'm like, I can't afford to live anywhere else. Like, I can't afford to move out of my parents' house at this point in time. But my parents' house was like the most toxic environment ever. I was like, fuck this place. So, anyway, all of this led to me being like, we have to do this cross country road trip. Like, we have to get out of here. We have to go somewhere else and work. So we ended up doing it. And I have to say, like, I know everybody was not traveling at that time for a reason, but traveling was great during that summer because there was like nobody out. It was just like we were the only people. And it felt very safe because of that. You know what I mean? Like it's like here's us and nobody else driving cross country. It was awesome. Gas prices were low. Like it was a very great time like looking back on it to do it. So anyway, we drove cross country. We were out of state. We're from Massachusetts. So we were out of the state for around like 7 or 8 months. Like we left in June and then we didn't come back until like basically like November, December of that following year in 2020. And then by that time we came back and we were back in Salem. But we were gone for that whole stretch. And essentially before I left, I had set the intention that I'm still going to work on my deity relationships. At the time, it was primarily Hades. I've been working with Hades for a long time, and he was sort of the main deity that I was working with at that time. So, that was the priority is maintaining that relationship with him and continuing to grow that relationship. So I did set that intention. I also set the intention for the entire trip that this trip would help me actualize my eventual career. I knew we weren't going to work in national parks forever. It was just sort of like a fun thing that we could do. And we were like, we might as well just do it. Like it's a fun opportunity. And we're doing nothing anyway for the rest of the summer. And we both lost our jobs. So we might as well just go cross country and do this thing that we were kind of thinking about doing anyway. So I had set the intention that at the end, like by the time I came back, I would have actualized something in my career. Like I would have created some sort of forward momentum. I knew at the time that I really wanted to like start posting more online. I had like no social media presence at this time, like wasn't posting on Instagram. I didn't have my account that I have now on Instagram, which is like my primary social media. But I knew that I wanted to pursue that. I had been operating like a small scale events-based tarot business since 2018. So it was 2020. So around that time, I'd been reading tarot professionally for around 2 years. Anyway, it was just like it wasn't online. It was just in town, around town, events-based tarot. So I'd get like hired for. I did a lot of like escape rooms, like like random. This is such like an early, like a late 2010s story. Like, yeah, I used to work in a bunch of escape rooms. Like, what what is more like 2017 than that? But yeah, I started like reading tarot at these, like they would hire me to read like in their lobby and like read for like groups that would come in, like as part of the experience. And then it kind of branched out to like other parties and other events and that sort of thing. So I was doing that on the weekends throughout college and throughout this, whole through like up until 2020, where again I couldn't really do in-person events anymore. But I knew that I loved that and I wanted that to be more of like a primary thing. So my goal in my mind was I'm going to start social media. I'm going to start a tarot reading business and like a witchcraft educational business on social media. And that is the move that I'm planning on making, over the course of the summer and that sort of thing. And by the time I get back, it's actualized. So the entire trip I kind of treated like a spell, kind of like almost like a chaos magic spell where like the entire entity of the trip was me getting closer and closer to my goal. Like as we traveled cross country, I envisioned me getting closer and closer to my goal. And then while I was working, I imagined that like me being there, I would also be working on a greater and a larger career achievement, if that makes sense, right? So that was my witchcraft intention. I did a spell behind it. I like set that really strongly before we left. So anyway, we leave on the adventure. I did like take some items with me. I'll show you actually for those of you who are watching this as a video on YouTube, go follow me on YouTube. And go follow me on Instagram while you're at it, actually. I'm on Instagram at Angelica S. Krejci. And then YouTube, what the fuck is my YouTube? It'll be in the show notes. I'm like, I don't even know. But anyway, so this is this little herbal kit. It's kind of like some of the bottles, like, or not the bottles, but some of the containers are obviously like missing in action because I made this like 4 years ago. Some of them are still like I have like a whole herbal apothecary in this like where I'm pointing here on the screen. If you are watching this on video, like right to the left of me, I have this big herbal cabinet. So some of them are still in there. Some of them have been lost in time and space. But basically, what I'm holding up here is a David's tea sampler platter. And so it has a bunch of like little metal canisters in it that used to have tea in it. And I actually used to work retail at David's Tea, which is why I own this. But anyway, so I filled this up with a bunch of herbs and some herbal blends, like a money blend and a success blend and a travel success blend. I think I had like a travel protection blend. And I basically carried this with me cross country, really like small, easy to bring herbs and powders and other things like that that I wanted to bring. So that's one of the things that I made sure I packed. I also got like a bunch of small dropper bottles, like half-ounce bottles, and some roller bottle, like some, oil rollers. And I kind of like decantered all of my larger oils into those small bottles and into the roll-ons. And I kept those all like in a Ziploc so that when I wanted some sort of intention oil, I could just open that bag and I had like a bunch of options, but they were just really small, so I could take them with me. And so that's what I would recommend doing. I really enjoyed having those types of curios. So, if you're going on a longer trip or if you even are going on a shorter trip and you just want to make sure you have things with you, just create like smaller versions, essentially like little mini kits of the items that you really use a lot and you enjoy. This is also super funny. I had like my statue to Hades that I still have to this day. I bought it when I first started working with Hades, like, the first year I worked with Hades, I bought the statue. So I bought it when I was a teenager, and I've had it since. I've literally had it for almost 10 years at this point, which is so crazy. It definitely is wicked scuffed up, like, you can tell that I've had this statue for almost 10 years 'cause it's a little rough looking, but I, like, cannot get rid of it because it's a relic. It's like I love this statue. I will never part with it because it's just so special to me. But I wrapped it up in bubble wrap and clothes and all sorts of things, and I put it, like, in the car somewhere where we wouldn't, like, basically, I stuffed it in a place that we couldn't really access. Like, it was almost like you couldn't access it for day-to-day use, but if you wanna, like, store something long term, in the vehicle that we went cross country with, we put it in there. So, literally, Hades came with me cross country, like, my statue to Hades, and I took him out once we'd gotten to our destination and once we had, like, settled down, we ended up working in Zion National Park, which was amazing, so much fucking fun, like, I loved Zion so much, but yeah, so once we got to Zion, I took him out, I set him up. I didn't do a huge altar, but I just took him out and unwrapped him, and there he was with us. But I just love the even like, I love in retrospect, even though I didn't use the statue a lot and I probably could have done without it, I like the idea that, like, I physically brought him cross country. It felt like he's like my emotional support statue or something. And I had a history of taking the statue with me places. It was almost like a not like a joke because it obviously was like, my God, like I'm just taking his statue. But at the same time, I realized it was a little extra. But it kind of been like something that I'd done in the past. Like I remember I used to have this boyfriend. This was back before I was with my husband. I had this old boyfriend who I would, like, stay at his house sometimes for a couple days, and I would, like, dramatically bring my my Hades statue, and so it was sort of this I remember I would, like, put him on in my passenger seat and buckle him in and drive to my boyfriend's house and take him out. My boyfriend would be like, "Oh god, the fuck is that? What is Angelica with her Hades statue again showing up to my house for 3 days?" But anyway, I had this tradition of bringing Hades with me even on shorter trips, as a joke, kind of, like I don't know, it was, like, half serious and half, like, just funny, and I decided to bring him with me cross country, so that was really special. So those are, like, the primary items I brought and the things that I did and, like, the supplies that I had in advance. And then once we were, like, traveling, like, once we were on the road, it's a hard process, like, anybody who's traveled, like, a long distance in a car or a van or whatever, like, it's hard. It's not like, anyone that's like, "Oh, I'm traveling cross country in a car or a van," I'm like, "Go for it, it's so much fucking fun, I love it," like, it really is super special, I loved the experience, I would tell my kids to do it, like, I would tell anybody to do it. But at the same time, I also think to myself, yeah, that was like a really hard thing to do for such a long time. Like we were, traveling for it took us like because we tried to see a lot of destinations and we tried to like really go to a lot of places and national parks on the way to our destination, which was Zion. So it took us about a month and a half to go from Massachusetts to Utah because we literally like snaked through the country. Like we went down south, we went to New Orleans, we came up, we went through the plains, we spent a lot of time in, Colorado and Wyoming and a little bit of Idaho. We kinda came down into Utah, down from Salt Lake City, down into Zion, went to Las Vegas, like, we were, like, all over the place initially as we made our journey through the country, and it was so much fun, but it was hard, and so I found myself really, like, leaning on deities like Hades, my spirit team in general, some of the supplies that I had brought, prayers. I was also writing a lot of poetry at the time. I had just finished my creative writing thesis, my creative writing program, and I had specialized in poetry. So I was working on getting a lot of my poems published at the time, so I was like, writing a lot of poems, cleaning up a lot of poems, putting together like a mini poetry collection at the time. And so I did a lot of like writing devotional poems, writing poems to sort of help me process what was happening as we were traveling. Um, some poems that had like magical intention behind them. And I was just praying a lot and connecting with Hades daily all the time, like, multiple times a day, just because it was a difficult experience. And so I found myself really like leaning on Hades. I also found that because I didn't have a physical space for like Hades, like, I mean, we had the statue, but I wasn't like about to be popping him on the dashboard or anything. Because I didn't have a physical altar for Hades, I felt like both very connected to him because I sort of set the intention before we'd left that everywhere was going to be my altar to Hades. Like literally, we Hades wouldn't be bound to just this altar relationship. He would be all around me. I'd be able to connect with him, in a more non-physical way. And of course, I have an altar now and I still connect with Hades day to day when I'm not at the altar, but I felt like since I did not have a specific altar, like I had no altar built, I had broken down my altar, we were not doing altar work, I felt even more so like an added layer of the fact that every day and every moment was an opportunity to create some type of offering, to create some type of connective moment. And that is why I think my relationship with Hades at the time just absolutely blossomed and took off because it went from me like, connecting with him at the altar, feeling likely looking back on it at the time, I was really busy. I was in college. I was really doing all sorts of stuff. I probably didn't get to the altar as much as I wanted to or whatever. But then that was all broken down. And now I was like connecting with him 3 times a day, 4 times a day, like, all the time, writing poems to him, writing prayers, reciting prayers. I would go out on the side of the road and, like, do whatever, give him, like, some coffee, some gas station coffee that I got as a libation, like, all sorts of connective moments, with him. And it just skyrocketed, like, our relationship really, really took off at that time, and that's sort of when I was like, "Oh, this makes sense." Like, me connecting with him deeper, me serving him deeper, me going into a deeper level of the relationship is sort of naturally happening because of that trip and because of the fact that he was my only deity at the time and so many things that led to just our connection growing. But I love it, and I thought it was just so special, and I still have, like, the little poetry book. I had, like, a Hades prayer and poetry book that I had when I was traveling, and I wrote so many amazing things in there, and I still have it to this day, and sometimes if I ever just, like, feel like, I love the Orphic hymn to Hades, but if I'm ever like, I don't really wanna do the Orphic hymn, like, what else can I do for Hades? Like, what other prayer can I read? I'm like, "Oh, I have, like, an entire book of prayers I wrote to Hades. Let's read one of those. Let's recite one of those." Um, maybe I will. Ooh, I'm like, can I read one? Like, let's see if I can find. I'm like, where is it? It's probably down by my altar. But yeah, maybe I'll post them on Instagram as well. But yeah, so many great prayers to Hades that came out of that trip. But so that was one of the things that just was so great about the trip, and so connective about the trip. And then again, I had set that intention that the entire trip would be this thing that set off the path and the trajectory of my career. I didn't really like I was posting a lot on a different Instagram account about my trip, but it wasn't really until we were in Zion for a couple months, we were working for a couple months that I was like, okay, I'm like, it's time to start up my social media page, like my official, like account, right? So I set it up in about September of 2020. And I had also gotten like a correspondence, I think it's just like a random text or a message from somebody that I went to college with, and she was basically like, "Hey, this podcast is looking to like interview a witch or like a magical practitioner. You should totally apply for it." And so I ended up applying for it. I ended up getting the gig, but it was like also really strange because they told me I was going to be on like a panel of a bunch of witches and it was going to be like a 10-minute Zoom call. But then it ended up being a full interview, and yeah, it was, like, not my favorite interview. I wouldn't like it was really like, there were so many factors that were really strange about it, including me. Like, I was really weird about it because we didn't have Wi-Fi in Zion. Like, it was if you've ever been to Zion National Park, horrible cell service, which makes I mean, it's like literally the wilderness. Like, I'm not expecting very much out of it, you know? It's like literally the wilderness, but specifically Zion, like it's Zion Canyon, like the valley is like right in between these two huge walls, and then like up at the top is are like trails and like other things and other parts of the park, but like the canyon part, which is like where the narrows are and some of the other like smaller trails, the emerald pools, all of that, like that is all in the canyon, and we lived in the canyon, and so we couldn't get any Wi-Fi because the canyon walls were just too big and thick, and it would like block out cell service and Wi-Fi. um so basically, I had to take this Zoom call from the hotel office, like from like the concierge desk. And I had to like call in. I don't know if anybody's ever called in on a landline to a Zoom call, but I did it because I was like, okay, like let's try, right? It was probably the world's like, if a, as a podcaster, it's probably like a total nightmare to have this happen. Like when I'm looking back on it, like from their perspective. So, the whole thing was wild, but I'm happy I did it because it really helped my career. Like at the time, like early stages of my career, it was a total like serendipitous opportunity, random opportunity that helped me sort of jumpstart that leap. So I think I gained like a couple hundred followers from that, which is like my first followers on Instagram. Woo, I don't, if you're one of them, like if you were here from that interview, wow, like you've really been here for all of it. You've really seen the whole journey, right? You've really seen the whole thing. That the contents of that interview, I won't like dwell too much on it. But they were sort of like hoping that I would talk about certain things and say certain things. And so I sort of adjusted like myself to sort of like base it off of what they really wanted to hear from me, which is something that I probably wouldn't like, I definitely wouldn't do now, and something that obviously doesn't really resonate with my brand at this time. But it was really cool. However, because of that, because I really didn't because I wasn't like myself in that interview, and I was kind of like just playing into what they wanted me to talk about, because they told me, right before the interview, like, we want you to cover these specific things. We don't really want to hear about this or whatever. Because of that, I felt like some of the clients or some of like the um followers I'd gotten at the time were like a great start, but they sort of weren't like my ideal followers or clients, and not their fault. It was literally my fault because I wasn't really myself at first. I wasn't really showing my true self in that particular like interview. However, like the spell that I had woven beforehand completely came true in the sense of I went from having no clients, right? I mean, I'd had some of, I'd obviously done tarot before. I'd been a professional reader for 2 years at this time in my events business, but I had no online clients. And I was trying to start this kind of whole social media platform. And I went from like 50 followers to like 1,000 followers. And then I went from 0 clients to like 50 new clients that I was working with and doing readings with. And a lot of them were like, again, some of them were so amazing. Some of them were fun and awesome, but maybe like not ultimately aligned for me. But I learned so much in that time. And it also really helped me like refine what I really did wanna talk about and what I really did wanna focus on. And what I kind of am saying by all of this is at first, like, on the podcast, they really wanted me to talk about love. So I talked a lot about love and love readings and love magic and, like, all of that kind of stuff, which if you know me, you're like, "Oh my god, that's crazy," because I'm not. Like, I love glamour, but I'm not like a love witch. I'm not like a, like a Venusian, like, "Ooh, yes, love." Like, it's just not what I do. And so, doing all the love readings, that's basically what the clientele was at the time, and talking about love really kind of like led me to this place where I'm like, oh, I did it. I became a witch on the internet. I became a professional tarot reader, but I don't really want to talk about love. So then I transitioned, and then I, started talking about other things, and here we are now, right? so many years later, really knowing what I am doing and who I'm serving and all of that kind of thing, right? But it was so palpable in the way that the spell worked and developed, and it was just, like, shocking to me. Like, I was just like, "Wow," like, that, honestly, at the time, couldn't have gone better. You know what I mean? Like, it was so good. Like, it worked. Like, it happened. Like, I suddenly, like, literally overnight had a bunch of new clients and a following, and I was doing it, you know? So it was so great, and I loved that. I also was doing a lot of glamour magic too to sort of bring about that opportunity. So I'd done that sort of overarching spell, but I'd also, throughout the summer, as I was starting up this Instagram page, like sort of because I started it up, I started doing a lot of intentional glamour magic. And even like a little bit before I started the page, I did some glamour magic around just getting new opportunities, just like attracting opportunities to be on a podcast, which ended up happening. Or I was also doing a lot of like publishing of my poems at the time. And I ended up getting like 10 or 15 poems published throughout different journals and magazines and that sort of thing. So getting my work noticed, getting myself noticed, just like a bunch of getting myself noticed and being open for opportunities and open for money and open for new things. And I remember thinking at the time, like, I don't know what this is going to add up to, but this is my goal. And I think I can make it happen, even though I have no idea how to make it happen. Like, I want to have new clients. I want to read tarot professionally online. I want to create a social media presence. I want to publish poems. I want to receive opportunities. I want to transition my career to do that full time. And I had no idea, like, logistically how to do it, like, at all. Like, I was like, I don't know how this is going to happen. But I did the magic and it just like happened. And I think, I'm kind of getting off topic from travel, but I think that this is a really important thing that I want you to take away from this as well is like when you have a goal, but you have no idea how it's going to develop, like you're like, I just don't like I literally have never done this before, especially if it's such a like a bigger goal or a goal that feels really out of reach right now. Just do the magic. Like just do the magic, do glamour magic for it, do some, daily glamours, do a big overarching spell kind of like I had done. And just believe that like it is happening. It's just like the answers of how to do it, of how to take action on it are going to be the result of the magic, right? And that thing might just suddenly pop into your life because that's what happened with me. I had no idea how I was going to make this happen. I was doing my glamours, I had done that big spell, and then this opportunity had just fallen into my lap. And again, I was away from the majority of my magical tools. I had this tiny little like kit of herbs, tiny kit. I had like, maybe 5 or 6 intention oils and little droppers. That was it. Like I didn't have anything else, and I made it happen. And so some of the spells I was doing at that time throughout the summer was I was doing a lot of like daily glamours, and a lot of it was based in breath work and intention and orc field work and a lot of like non-physical magic around that. We just finished talking and ruled a room about my non-physical glamour magic tool that I use, and I was using this at the time and working with this particular tool at the time as well in order to do some simple daily glamour magic. And the beautiful thing about this particular spell that I just shared in my glamour magic program called Rule the Room is you cast a spell once. It's kind of like a chaos magic inspired spell. You cast a spell once and then you've created this glamour magic tool, this like non physical tool that you can connect with, similarly to a servitor, and you can work with it to shift your perception. And so I was working with that tool at the time, in addition to some other auric work, some other breath work. I had like a little glamour oil, I think that I had purchased and then I'd been bringing with me. I would like mix it into my lotion and I would lotion myself up. And I was wearing a lot of lotion because it was the desert and it was so dry. My skin was so dry. So like every day I'd put lotion on and I would mix it into my lotion. I have like vivid memories of being in Zion National Park, getting ready for work, and I'm putting on my glamour lotion and I'm saying like, I am being seen. opportunities are coming to me, et cetera, et cetera. And so that was a big thing. I did a lot of kinesthetic magic. So I did a lot of like listening to a spell and dancing and imagining listening to a spell. Is that what I said? My goodness. Listening to a song, dancing, and imagining like an outcome or a goal that I wanted, which is still like my number one type of daily magic I do. You don't need anything other than a space to just dance, So that might be if you're like traveling with a bunch of people or if you're going on a shorter trip, that might not be feasible. But, I would have a lot of time to myself and I would put on a song and dance and think about this intention. And I thought a lot about my poems getting published, which ended up happening. I thought a lot about writing and starting to write my current writing project that I'm getting to the end of, which is so exciting and amazing. I remember doing that about social media and reading tarot. I would literally imagine myself reading tarot for people. And literally, like a month later, I got 50 new clients. It was amazing. So, that is the majority of the work that I did when I was in Zion. And again, most of it was non-physical. A lot of it was just like me with an intention oil, me with, my non-physical tools, me with my servitors, me with my deities. That's another big one. I did a lot of petitions to deities. I would do a lot of like, all right, Hades, I'm gonna give you like a libation for the next week of coffee. I had a big pot of coffee in our room when we lived in Zion, and I would like brew a big pot of coffee. I used to have to walk to work at 6 a.m. because I worked at the front desk. So I would have to like walk to work um, and walk to the hotel through the national park at 6 a.m. with like the mountain lions walking around. It was so scary. Like, it was honestly kind of terrifying, like complete darkness walking through this quiet national park. But I made it. We're here, right? But I would brew this big pot of coffee and I had this specific area. It was like this sort of cemented, like asphalt area. I didn't want to like pour on like the flora and fauna, of course, but it was this like asphalt area right under this tree. And like that was where I would pour out like half of my coffee. And I would do this like in almost like novenas. Like I would do this for like a span of a couple days and I would recite the Orphic hymn to Hades as I walked to work and I would, connect with him at that time. And I felt like 6 a.m. or 5:30 a.m., pitch black in this canyon, connecting with the energy of this like of the land. Like it was just so thonic and it was just such a perfect time to work with Hades and petition Hades. So I would do a lot of that whenever I needed something like a petition from Hades. I remember there was a couple other deities that I connected to when I was in Zion, which is really, really fascinating. Some of them I continue to work with, some of them I don't. Or I haven't. But I also ended up buying a lyre when I was in Zion. I ordered it online. We could get like packages and stuff like that. So I remember I was like, okay, this is a perfect place to like teach myself how to use this lyre, like this instrument. It's like a like little mini harp. And so I ordered one. I got one sent to my dorm room when I was living in Zion, and I started to play my lyre every day. I do not have this routine anymore. I sometimes play it, but not as much as I did when I was in Zion, which I would love to get back into it. I never became very good at it, even though I tried to practice all the time. But what I would do is I would practice by looking at the Orphic hymns and seeing if I could create like a little song for like each hymn. So I did a lot of like singing hymns to different deities of the Greek pantheon, not just Hades. And so I made some contacts through that with deities of the Greek pantheon. Like again, some I work with still, some I don't. And that was really fun and a little bit more of a deity work moment and less of like a thaumaturgical spell work kind of thing. But that also helped me feel really connected. So not everybody is going to be able to bring instruments and things like that, but my takeaway from that specific thing is just like because I was traveling, because I wasn't in my space, a couple things happened. First of all, I felt like again, the entire world was my altar. The whole of nature and space and time and all of that. I know it sounds super dramatic, but like that was my altar. I also felt like I almost had to think out of the box to connect with gods. And so once prayer became a little like, okay, I'm praying every day, that's my primary way of connecting. Once that became a little mundane, if you would say that, then I was like, well, maybe I'll pray with this lyre. Maybe I'll like get kind of I'll use this time to learn this instrument and do this thing that maybe I wouldn't have done if I was just at home, like living my day-to-day life. And so that's what I would recommend is just use the new space, the new place, the newness of the experience of travel to help you experiment in your magical practice and in your deity work practice and try new things. So that's sort of the first takeaway, if you will. Some of the other takeaways that I have for from this experience, from my 8-month travel journey and tips for you of approaching travel. I think, first of all, there's a difference between shorter trips and longer trips. I think both of them are very connective and you can get a lot out of both. In 2021, I did a little bit of a shorter trip. We did another road trip, but it was just to the south, and we went to Florida, went to New Orleans again for the second year in a row, and a couple other places. Asheville, we love Asheville, North Carolina. If you live in Asheville, woo, I love your city so much. So we stayed there in 2020, and then we went back in 2021 and stayed there for a little bit longer then. But yeah, that was a shorter trip. That trip was really, really interesting. Connected a lot with Hades during that trip as well, did a lot of similar things. Didn't bring a whole ton of magical supplies on that one just because it was a little bit of a shorter road trip. I've also taken other short trips in the last couple of years, like just weekend trips, or I've been to Norwalk in Seattle, which is I think it's like, is it called Northwestern Astrological Convention? I think that's what it stands for. But I went to Norwalk a couple times, a couple other shorter trips. I think with shorter trips, the important thing for me in shorter trips is to sort of connect again with an intention for the trip. And rather than worrying about doing magic on the trip, just viewing the shorter trip, if it's 4 days, 5 days, 7 days, 6 days, like whatever it is, right? One day, viewing that period as this transitional period where when you come back, something about your life will be different. Or when you come back, some type of shift will be made. I also do a lot of like travel when I'm or stuff when I'm on the airplane, because I find that being on the airplane is such a fascinating thing. Like whenever I'm on an airplane with all the changes and pressure in the cabin, it feels like I'm meditating. Like it almost has the same experience to me as that. So I often do a lot of like, again, mental magic when I'm on the airplane, like breath work, envisioning things, visualization, yeah, meditating, like all of that kind of stuff I like to do on the plane. I'll set an intention at the start of the plane, and then when we take off, I'll really imagine like that the energy and the momentum of the plane ascending and taking off is launching that intention into the world. So that's just one of the tricks that I like to do when I'm on shorter trips that involve like planes and taking off. But even if it's just a road trip, like the momentum that takes you there, if you're going on a train somewhere, the energy of the train going forward, like that, like enchant that, work with the momentum of that and set an intention for that. And maybe worry less about like bringing all your tools, unless there's maybe one specific intention that you want to bring some tools around to solidify that or something like that. But again, if it's a short trip, you don't have to feel like you have to do your magical workings or whatever. It's like you can take a little bit of a break. Sometimes a break is good because it kind of reestablishes why you enjoy magic and you get really excited to come back to it. So for shorter trips, I wouldn't worry about it so much. I would just set a broader intention for the trip and then maybe just do some journaling. Use it as an opportunity, if you work with deity, to connect with your deities in a non-altar based way, and that might help you. Again, like let's say your altar practice has gone a little stale, or you find yourself in almost like a routine with your deities, which can sometimes happen of like, oh, am I really connecting to them? What do they need from me? Like that can sometimes happen in pagan deity work. And so by traveling, even if it's a short time, using that as an opportunity to explore alternate ways of connecting with deity, and the fact that you sort of have to connect with them through prayer or through non-physical ways, like non-altar ways, I guess you could say, and just kind of using that as a way to reconnect with deity. So I like to set that intention whenever I go on a short trip. I'm going to connect with my deity in a new and maybe fresh way, and I'm going to set an intention for the trip. If it's a longer trip, I think that this is an opportunity for you to consider things like, what products am I going to bring? What herbs do I want? What does it look like for me to do magic while I'm traveling? Maybe bringing herbs isn't practical for you if you don't feel like you would really use them or you'd be in a position where you can even apply them in any way. So maybe a couple weeks before you leave on this longer trip, really kind of dissecting your magical practice, thinking about it, thinking like, what is my day-to-day routine going to be and how can I infuse magic or and ritual into my life at that time. I would also think of like your magical practice in all its parts. Like, okay, here's my connection with deity or the divine, whatever you do for theurgy and feeling closer to the divine in some way. Really kind of nail down your toolkit for that. And try to think of adaptations to things that you do in your space that you might not be able to do when you're on that longer trip and try them out and see how it works, right? I would also let your deities know that you are taking this trip and that they're going to have to connect with you in a different way. If you are like, let's say you're doing something like I did where I literally like didn't like I moved out of my parents' house, I went on this trip, I didn't have an altar anywhere. I broke down my altars and I just packed them up. And once I came back to Massachusetts, I rebuilt them in my new space. But I told my deities, hey, I'm breaking down your altars. You can't connect with me here anymore. Like if you want to connect with me, you have to connect. You have to come to me. We have to talk we have to talk through divination, through psychic connection, through dreams. Like this is not a meeting place for us anymore. So I'd also recommend doing that, just like letting your deities know that you're going to connect with them differently moving forward and maybe even just doing some divination with them and chatting with them about what they need from you, what you need from them, what they recommend, and making it clear to them that, you're going to have to connect in a different way. You can also do that on a shorter trip as well. And if you are going on a shorter trip where like you're leaving your altar up, or even a longer trip where you're leaving your altar up, I would clean the altar right before you go and make it really fresh and freshen it up and put like fresh candles or whatever you need to do to sort of refresh the altar, get rid of old offerings. And then if there's any like offering component like water that you keep on your altar or food or whatever it is, I would just take that away and get rid of it just so, it doesn't get all gross or it doesn't like the flowers don't die, because then you have these dead flowers on an altar that you try not to have dead flowers on, or you have this like crusted over water bowl with that's like all cloudy and it evaporated by now, and that kind of energetically doesn't really feel very good. Whereas just taking the water off and being like no water right now on the altar, taking the flowers off, taking anything that can die or get gross or expire off the altar, and then letting the deities know, hey, if you want to connect with me, it's not going to be here. And I call it like winterizing the altar. Like, when I don't know if anybody you winterize your lawnmower or maybe you've never done this. This is probably only for like a niche crowd. But you put certain like chemicals in the basin of your, I think, is that what you do? I don't know. Maybe I really don't know. Of your lawnmower to make sure that it stays over the winter or whatever. Or like you winterize your cottage or something, or like a house that you don't use in the winter so that the pipes don't burst and freeze. It's kind of like similar to the altar where you just try to clean it, you try to take everything off of it, even simplify it a little bit, or zhuzh it up, change it a little bit, maybe even leave a petition on the altar that states that the fact that this is sort of still a sacred space for this deity and an offering for this deity, but it's not a place where this deity can really come and chat with you at this time. So once you've kind of determined whether or not it's a short trip or a long trip, that's when you can kind of figure out what the plan of action is. And for shorter trips, it's a little bit more about the overall intention of the trip. And that would be my biggest tip for shorter trips. And then for the longer trip, it's really just about you adapting your magical practice to both that specific trip, your intentions around it, where you're going, because I think that that can really change the approach. If you're going like on like a religious pilgrimage to like Chalice Well or like the Necromantian in Greece, which I hope to do in the next couple of years, I might bring different things or I might approach it from a different perspective. So taking all of that into consideration and maybe even trying to prepare for it in advance with your deities, with your own practice, shifting things around, doing some magic that you won't be able to do right before you go off on the trip that really kind of sets you off in the right direction for the next couple months. And just remembering, like, most of all, you are the magic. Like, it's you. It's your thoughts, it's your intentions, it's your will. I mean, overall, it's your freaking will. Like, that's how you fucking make magic happen anyway. So you can use your will anywhere. You can, inject your will into the world in any way and make things happen. You can achieve a state of gnosis anywhere and make things happen, right? It's just so possible for you. So, really considering how you achieve that, what you do, nailing that practice down, all of the above, right? Is important, and it also helps you just learn more about your magical practice and design the practice that you really want anyway. So even if you're not traveling or you don't have a big trip coming up, this might be something to consider anyway. It's funny, I cover a lot of this, like all of this type of thing of like auditing your practice, considering things in your practice, shifting things, creating a practice that really resonates with you. I talk about a lot of that in the program that I ran over the spring called Of the Heart. I will put the link to Of the Heart down below. It was basically a completely like pre-recorded program, so it's basically works just as like a pre-recorded course. So if you want, if you're like really interested in how to make your practice more yours and how to self audit your practice and grow your practice from a personal perspective, a sovereign magical perspective, or almost like a sort of chaos magic perspective, that course is a really great witchcraft practice development course. I would really, really recommend it because almost everything I said in this particular video is like a major theme in Of the Heart. So if you want more direction on that, if you want specific workbooks around that and instructions, that is a great resource for you. I'm also going to be doing a one off workshop on August 6th about how to have more fun in your magical practice. It's called Sweeten Your Magic, and it's all about how to cultivate a super fun practice that you really resonate with. So, my specific focus for this class is going to be sharing my biggest tips for infusing more fun into your practice and also talking about the larger themes and tenets and chaos magic that really help to play into that, help to almost like infuse that with extra vibrancy of why those things work, if that makes sense, right? So I'm going to give my tips and also the philosophies behind the magical logic behind those tips for how they work and how it really impacts your magical practice. And we're also going to be doing some like journaling together, some prompts together, and you're going to leave with a bunch of brainstormed information about how to have more fun in your magical practice and how to cultivate a practice that really prioritizes fun. This is a perfect workshop for those of you who are maybe intermediate witches who find yourself a little in a rut with either your deity work practice or your magical practice. You want to just infuse your practice with a lot more fun. You find that right now your magic is just not actually like doing it for you for whatever reason. Maybe you just got back from a trip. Maybe you are in school right now or just in a season of life where things are busy and you want to make like you want to sort of infuse your off time and your precious free time right that you have with magic and also see your magical practice as something that is such a fun thing so that you reach for it more, so that you approach it from that perspective more. I think that sometimes a practice just can get really bland, or maybe like you find yourself as kind of an armchair witch or an armchair occultist, and you find yourself like not actually practicing that much, even though you're gathering a lot of information. So, this workshop is to sort of fix those potential issues that you could be experiencing as an intermediate witch and just learning how to have more fun. So, come to Sweeten Your Magic on August 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can essentially buy it as a one-off workshop. So if you just want to buy like a one class ticket to this, then that is going to be available in the show notes. And you can also access this by signing up for the Stars tier of the Palace Coven. It's the highest tier of my monthly membership group where we have new content and new events and all sorts of things happening every single month. We also do weekly tarot live streams, which are super fun. I do like a group reading and an energy kind of message for the week based off of tarot and astrology. So you can access Sweeten Your Magic through the Stars Court tier of the Palace Coven. The Palace Coven, we do like a workshop every month. So for the month of August, that is going to be, or for like Leo season, I should say, Sweeten Your Magic is our workshop for Leo season. So all right, everybody. I hope to see you in Sweeten Your Magic or in another program soon. And we will talk super soon. Go follow me on Instagram. Go check out the notes down below. And I hope you have a super magical rest of your week. Bye, everybody.